We are calling on everybody to think Africa, act Africa, and prosper Africa.
It comes down to the change of mindset.
I think this is an opportunity which Africa should not miss.
We are implementing the Africa we want.
A lot of the countries understand that this is good for them, that it is a game changer.
This is an historic moment for our continent.
So this is entirely African driven. These African countries are making a treaty among themselves.
We've been brought up with so many borders. You know, we have our little countries, we have our little economies, our little sectors. We have so many things that divide us, and I think this is an opportunity to really push against those boundaries and to change them.
As the old adage goes, there is strength in unity. For the 55 African Union member states, that strength lies in numbers. With a population of 1.2 billion and a GDP of $2.5 trillion, the prospect and now realization of a continental free trade area for Africa promises to usher in a new era of industrialization and business opportunities towards the realization of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want.
It has been a long journey, difficult and long, but we had visionaries. When we created the Organization of African Unity in 1963, President Nkrumah of Ghana made a clarion call: Africa must unite. In June 2015, the heads of state and government had an assembly in Johannesburg, and they adopted the principles for negotiations, the roadmap, as well as the institutions. And we had several rounds of negotiations. Then the regional communities came in to give technical inputs with other strategic partners, namely the African Development Bank, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And the initial good results were established in December 2017. Then in January, we gave the report to the heads of state and government, and they were very impressed. They said the remaining work can be done in a short time, so let's have a signing ceremony on 21st March 2018 in Kigali. And we were able to produce the consolidated text that was signed today. It's composed of the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area and the protocol on trade in goods, the protocol on trade in services, and the protocol on the settlement of disputes. And this is where we are.
The African Continental Free Trade Area will affect the development of African countries by boosting employment opportunities, increasing food security, increasing competitiveness of African industrial products, and enhancing participation of the continent in global trade.
For us, the African Continental Free Trade Area, of course, it's a flagship project of Agenda 2063, but more than that, it's an instrument for solidarity, and it's an instrument for connection between African people and basically dismantling the borders and the barriers that are there, because there are great opportunities for goods to move more efficiently, for services, as well as people. So I think that for us, it's a very important lever for achieving multiple objectives?
Well, what got us here is increasing realization that everywhere neighbors trade with neighbors. This is normal. What has been an anomaly for this continent is that since the 15th century, our trade has been directed primarily outside the continent. And that has to do with the way that Africa was inserted into the global economy. So this is what we are trying to reverse. So everything, our infrastructure has been built to support taking commodities from the interior to the ports and out to the north. So everything concerning trade has been organized around that external trade.
The CFTA negotiations have been complex, needing to take into consideration the individual interests of member states. Beyond the signing of the CFTA, individual countries will need to ratify the agreement.
There is supposed to be a process of ratification before the agreement can come into force. And for ratification, we need 22 member states to deposit their instruments of ratification, meaning that they have gone through their internal, local, national processes for accepting the documents. And then once we have 22 instruments of ratification, then that is when it now comes into force. The agreement that we are creating is not a mere declarative statement or a mere policy statement. It is actually a legal agreement that creates rights, obligations. So we think that at the end of the day, this is an agreement that will have some teeth. But I think beyond all that, there is a political commitment to see this done.
Intra-African trade is one of the lowest of any region globally. The impact of the CFTA will mean Africa's industrial exports are able to diversify, encouraging a move away from extractive commodities such as oil and minerals. Economic integration for the continent will further provide harmony of customs, borders, and the movement of goods.
What this initiative is all about is to say to ourselves, okay, let's create a legal framework, let's establish a treaty so that there is certainty, because in trade, your business person wants to know that those goods that are going across are not going to be seized or discriminated against in some way, that it will be a level playing field. And also our tariffs are relatively high, over 6% is the average across the continent. To say we want to bring this down to zero, which is what they have agreed for 90% of products, and also to deal with non-tariff barriers like your roadblocks, your anti-trade behavior along the border, harassment at the border.
The flagship project of Agenda 2063 promises to be the world's largest free trade area. But what are the practical implications of having the CFTA implemented? And how exactly would an agreement of this magnitude revolutionize business and movement across Africa?
My mother was a small-scale trader after retiring from her teaching profession. So from very practical terms, having seen people like my mother, small traders, this will facilitate their movement, because alongside the signing of the CFTA, there are also member states, 27 member states, signed on to the free movement protocol, movement of persons. So cutting the red tape, knowing predictable tax regimes, common external tariff barriers. This gives them assurance, it gives them predictability, and it also gives them a sense that they have protections that are continental.
The most interesting thing to know about this kind of legal agreement is that in certain ways, it protects the little man the most. At the end of the day, for the small man, for the entrepreneur in Nigeria or some other country, the fact that there is a legal agreement that gives him rights as well as obligations actually makes it easier for that little or that young entrepreneur, that small SME company to take the right decisions, because you know that you are not going in on your own, you are going in with the entire legal framework of the African Union.
We have signaled to the world that we want to come together, and we do not want the Africans and the rest of the world to say the leaders made a grand celebration to sign the instruments, but they are not producing results. So we are focusing on tangible results, because this is what the ordinary Africans expect. And the business community is going to join us in the advocacy program. The parliamentarians are going to join us. The civil society organizations are also going on. So Africa at large is committed.
We have to basically galvanize all the stakeholders who are going to make this happen. It's not government that's going to trade. It's the private sector. It's the young entrepreneurs. It's the cross-border traders who are women, who are going to ask the question, who should be asking the question, so what does this mean for me? So implementation, I think, will be something that happens at different levels. It will be at the national level, where countries who are signatory to the agreement first of all engage stakeholders on how to go about this. And the other level is the regional level, because as we know, regional economic communities have been working with member states, also in terms of the regional blocks. And